Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to Horus Heresy lore breakdown for the Outcast Dead. Our heroes / villains, it's starting to get difficult to tell at this point considering how many hundreds of Imperial Army men, plus 2 custodies they've butchered so far, have broken out of prison with Kaiser Lane. They then grabbed an aircraft and headed off to safety. Or so they thought. They were intercepted on the way, and whilst the Thurva managed to throw off their pursuers and kill them using his psychic trickery, the craft nonetheless crashed into the petitioner city, within a very plot-convenient distance of the Temple of Woe, and Antioch, the apothecary, who had helped out Roxanne getting some medicines early on in the book. Now, very fortunate that the only 2 survivors of the Argo would be in such close proximity. Fortunate indeed. The Space Marines are now, however, being hunted by the Japanese man, who does a rather clever thing. He hacks into Kaiser Lane's augmetic eyes and uses those to gather information on them. Why he couldn't simply just GPS locate them when he has the signal, I don't know, but at the very least he got to listen in on their conversation a little bit, and it was a damn interesting conversation, for, you see, up until this point, the Outcast Dead, this loose alliance of traitor legionnaires, or well, quote-unquote traitor legionnaires, have been united with a common goal: getting the fuck out of prison, presumably alive, if at all possible. However, now that they have technically escaped from that prison, their alliance starts splintering rather quickly, as the Thurva decides to tell them why he broke Kaiser Lane out along with them. He informs them that he believes that Kaiser Lane has in his head the future, the literal future, the answer to all of the questions. How will the war end? Who will win? How will they win? Etc. All of that in Kaiser Lane's head. A treasure that the Thousand Son is most keen on, first and foremost, unlocking, and secondly, ensuring that the correct people get access to it. The Thousand Son is, just as his Legion and his Primarch, misguided, but loyal, and he wishes to keep this information for the Imperium. I think he's probably hoping that either it will be information they'll be winning the war, and so bolster the morale of all the Imperial's fighting forces, thereby ensuring that victory. Because here's the thing, they kind of, they place it seeming as if all of these guys believe that the future will then be fixed and nothing can really change it, but the Thousand Son then presents a counter-argument. If an army knows for absolutely sure that it will win, then probably that's what's going to happen. Battles are, by and large, questions of morale, after all. And the side that's completely sure it ain't gonna lose is probably going to have an advantage in that particular department, isn't it? Alternatively, if it becomes known that they are actually going to lose, alright, in that case, he's probably going to do everything he can to deny this information, or perhaps even possibly manipulate and twist it in such a way as to either hide it, therefore avoiding the backlash from the certain fate of their defeat, or by twisting it so as to appear like victory, therefore achieving the, well, same goals as if it was actually victory. It's an interesting idea, really, the immutability of fate. Now, in 40k, of course, we pretty much know that that isn't the case, because there are so many different strands of fate, and forces have to actually work towards these goals to shape history, and making decisions and not making decisions have a clear effect upon this web of fates. However, of course, that is a bit more metaphysical, is it not? There is a problem, however. The Thousand Son is not the only one who escaped, of course. He's also brought with him a few World Eaters who are less enthused by the idea of simply handing this over to their, well, previous captors, basically. They, at least 2 out of the 3, wish to return to their legions, wish to return to Angron and fight by his side, because, they reason, the Primarchs must have had a good reason for turning against the Emperor. I mean, this is kind of obvious as well. The Space Marines are, more so in some legions, but all of them are genetically engineered to follow the leader, essentially, to worship their Primarchs. And so for them to automatically assume that their Primarch must have had a good reason makes absolute total sense. When the Thousand Sun ask them, okay, but what if you actually go there and then you realize that no, Angron didn't have a good reason for this. In fact, he is a traitor of the vilest sort. To which, of course, the World Eater gives a very World Eater-esque question. Then I'll draw my sword and I'll try to kill Angron. Which will work out damn well, I'm certain. To be fair, he's aware that he's going to get butt-fucked anyways, so, might as well. But this is a bit of a problem for the Thousand Sun, because now he has to kind of convince them. Luckily, he gets interrupted by the notice that they're being spied upon. The Space Marines react quickly and gouge Kai Zulane's eyes out. Which, I mean, harsh, but also, I suppose, necessary. I mean, it's a bit of an oddity, because they report that they can, like, hear them. Maybe the Japanese person is reading lips or something, because I don't know why they would put audio receptors in augmetic eyes. That seems odd. Now that I think of it, that seems really fucking strange. So, because he heard some of the talk about their conversation. In fact, they comment on it, and how, like, oh, they're going to return to their legions. Clearly, they're traitors, you know? It's a bit of an oddity now that I can think of it. Oh well, again, details. I mean, if it was just visuals, they could have just, I don't know, blinded him. And not gouging out his eye, but, putting a bandana on his head, since apparently they can't track their exact position, etc. But then again, the Legionnaires might not know this, so might as well just gouge them out. Now they're in search of an apothecary to stop Kai Zulane from dying due to this somewhat improvised form of surgery, and maybe, just maybe, also save one of their fellow Legionnaires who's taken quite the battering. First and foremost, breaking them out, and then in their vehicle crashing into the petitioner's city. Probably not the gentlest of arrivals, to be certain. However, before we get to the apothecarian, let us talk a bit more about Babu and his men. So, we get a look here now properly at the Babu. And the, not exactly subtle, but at least understated hints of his men become more apparent. So the Babu himself is a ginormous figure, wielding a humongously huge sword which no human could lift. He is infected with tumorous growths that make him cough in an unpleasing fashion, which, again, definitely suggests Thunder Warrior. And he also brings forth a weapon that it's basically outright stated that this is a bolt gun, but of a very, very, very early make. It also talks about how their armor seems to be a crude imitation of warriors of long lost times and so on. This guy is a Thunder Warrior. Quite clearly. He is somehow still alive, which is amazing in and of itself, because the Thunder Warriors not only suffer from considerable mental instability, but their bodies themselves are quite prone to breaking apart, creating cancers and tumors and all manners of horrible things, as this guy is a wonderful example of, naturally. Now, we could certainly launch into a discussion of whether or not the Emperor intended for that to happen, because there are good arguments for both things. I mean, on the one hand, the Emperor is not infallible. He's about as close to infallible as you probably will ever get within the Imperium, but he's not a god, as he keeps telling everybody, and nobody seems to be bloody listening. So he could simply have overlooked this, and been like, okay, well, these are my Thunder Warriors. I've made them for speed and strength. They're going to be the fastest, the most aggressive bastards ever. And then it turns out that this has led to a rather unfortunate cocktail of chemicals, which makes them incredibly mentally unstable, and also physically unstable as well over a period of time. Possibly. Alternatively, it is also, I would say, almost equally possible that the Emperor needed to conquer Terra quickly, and so threw caution to the wind, created these very unstable creatures, and basically used them as live ammunition. He knew they were gonna die, he accepted that sacrifice, and he didn't tell them about it because, They might not see the humor. Probably. Or hell, he may even have thought that, right, these creatures are so strong, so violent, so aggressive that I don't think I can control them. Once I had, like, when I've got enemies everywhere, like on Terra, yeah, I can just point them in a direction and, you know, they'll take care of the messy business on their own. But for conquering the galaxy, I am going to require not only a far more stable sort of soldier, I am also going to require a far more, obedient and controllable sort of soldier. Very possible, very possible. But we'll not get too deep into that here. The interesting part is that the Babu has learned of the arrival of this aircraft that crashed into his de facto domain, and as any good crime warlord, he of course takes an interest in this. Especially when he is told that everyone seemed to have survived the crash. And, well, as I'm sure you know, surviving plane crashes is, difficult. So he immediately surmises that there is something special about these visitors, and he sends out a group of his men to, see if they can't coax them into paying him a visit, and figure out a little bit more about why they're in his city, and whether or not he can profit on it. Wise man, this Babu. I kinda like him. He's also been engaging in a great deal of, backyard biology experiments as well. He's been trying to recreate the Thunder Warriors. He hasn't been having a whole lot of success because, well, he's just a normal dude, and with the exception of people with a great deal of plot armor, doing what the Emperor's done is, actually quite difficult. Again, not for certain characters, but for normal people it's fairly difficult. And in this case, most of Babu Dekal's experiments proved to be absolutely no match whatsoever for the Legionnaires. But Gotha, probably another Thunder Warrior, is able to not only stand up to them, but kill one of them and fight them to essentially a stalemate. After which, Gotha simply walks away and the Legionnaires let him. Out of respect, I guess. Right, well, at least the traitors get to be retarded occasionally as well. It's like, oh, there's a really dangerous enemy. I'm a Thousand Son. I tend to be rather pragmatic about these things. Bang, but no. Gotha was a good boy, and he shall be allowed to live, because he has a part yet to play as our heroes/villains now decide that they need to go to the Temple of Woe. How plotting, I mean, surprising. And so the outcast dead head over to the Temple of Woe, where they meet a bunch of civilians, semi-armed at least, who mistake them for the Babu's men, but the misunderstanding is quickly cleared up. Many snide comments and setting up plotty things about the faceless statue of an angel. That's going to be important fairly soon. We do get one interesting little tidbit here. So the World Eater has a little bit of a cooling down mantra that ends with, "For war care not from whence the blood flows." That is quite similar to the Khorne one, isn't it? Khorne does not care from whence the blood flows. Again, this is one of the legions that I think was probably fucked just to begin with. Now, the Warhounds, not so much, because the Warhounds didn't worship anger to the point the World Eaters do. The World Eaters, their primary strength, as they view it, is their rage. The Warhounds was aggression, and it may seem like a small, nitpicky distinction to make, but there is actually a vast gap between aggression, which can be controlled, focused, cold, and clinical, and rage, which is basically the exact opposite of those things. I miss the Warhounds. See, the Warhounds would be a really interesting loyalist chapter, because they would constantly be just be toying with the edge of cornet worship, and the only thing that keeps that in check is, well, their aggression. They're calm, collected aggression. No maddened berserk charges, just a pinpoint application of overwhelming force. Anywho, let's get into the end game here, shall we? Because a lot happens near the end here. A lot of action, a lot of people die. In fact, everyone basically fucking dies. This is one of the reasons why I don't know whether or not this book was actually really worth making, because basically all of the characters die at the end of this. We get a few of them who still survive, like the Waponese person, but pretty much all of the outcasts dead. The Thunder Warriors, okay, that was a nice little mention, and they do also. So they managed to seemingly either abduct the Lunar Wolf or kill him and drag his body away, because it's noted that his body is not amongst the fallen. And the Loyalists assume that he's escaped, but I think maybe that the Babu actually hauled him away and started experimenting on his gene seed, and apparently he had a breakthrough with this. He manages to succeed in some kind of test, some kind of decoding system, perhaps? And he feels this is a massive breakthrough. Now he can start to perfect his efforts to create Thunder Warriors, and presumably also keeping the Thunder Warriors that still exist. We know of 2, but could there be more? Possibly. Still alive. Trying to keep back the tumors growing all over his body and so on. That is interesting, but until we hear anything more about them, that's really all it is. So, the hunters bear down upon the Temple of Woe, basically butchering most of the civilian populace, but Rogel, Dawn, and the Sisters of Silence show up in the midst of this ginormous, horrible death melee, where Thurva decides to go for one last little gambit and releases the demonic entity that had been resting within the Faceless Angel. And considering this has literally been worshipped as a symbol of death, I can fully believe that there would be a monster in there, which manifests as the classical representation of death, a hooded figure, lacking the size, which is a little disappointing, but oh well, good enough. It is eventually defeated by Rogel Dawn, bringing along the Sisters of Silence, who surround it and simply just null out its warp essence, nice and simple. Thurva is still alive. He refuses to hand over Kaiser Lane like he has a fucking choice, and so he's shot. Because... duh. Okay. This Thousand Sun is so calm and collected in so many things, and yet also so utterly fucking retarded in so many things. Like, there's no actual point in resisting now. If you surrendered, you might have had a chance to work things later. If you're dead, you're dead. But nope, he just, he refuses, and so he gets shot. So he could at least have probably pretended, but never mind. Kaiser Lane has unlocked his memories via the help of Roxanne, and his memories are, well, exactly what we knew they would be, which is the disappointing part. The Imperium, everything will turn to shit, everything will be horrible, terrible, rawr. It makes a big song and dance about how shit the Imperium is going to be, but when you consider the fact that the alternative is, well, the death of the Imperium, and potentially the known galaxy, if Horus wins, according to the Eldar's prognostications anyways, that's not much of an alternative. Honestly, I think I'd take a shit future over that, but, well, I suppose that is all based on your standpoint at the time. So Kaiser Lane is then like, okay, well, this is a horrible truth. I can't let it get out. And that's the first sensible thing he's bloody said all the goddamn book. He knows that this would be a poison seeping throughout the Imperium. He knows this would be devastating. The knowledge that yes, the Imperium will win, but the cost of winning will be so unfathomably high as to make it almost not worth it at all. Of course, if this was an actual... See, here's the thing that annoys me. If Kaiser Lane is playing regicide with the Emperor, who's inside his brain, has unlocked this vision, and the Emperor's pretty much just like, yeah, that's more or less what I expected. Yeah, not particularly surprised there. And he mentions that the only winning move in some cases is to make sure that your enemy can't win either. Essentially, the Emperor is doing exactly what I figured a Tharva would have done and simply play the long game. Like, okay, you can't immediately see how you could turn this into a victory, but at least you haven't lost, giving you the chance to continue. If the literal future is set in stone, which I don't believe it necessarily is, then the Emperor chooses the lesser of all evils, basically, and goes like, okay, at least this way, the entire Imperium doesn't disappear into a screaming hellhole, and I have no chance whatsoever to ever recover it. At least this gives me a chance. A midget snowball's chance in hell, absolutely, but nevertheless, a chance. Kaiser Lane then is like, oh my god, it's too horrible, I need to die. And so he stares into Roxanne's third eye, which, is looking into the warp, and that kills him. Roxanne doing this willingly because she too understands. But here's the thing. Rogal Dawn's not a complete moron, although efforts have been made to portray him as such. Surely if he gained this if Kai basically said like, okay, Dawn, my dude, this is some serious shit, okay? This is going to be the most horrible thing you have ever imagined. Like, I can only tell you. Dawn would probably have humored him, because Dawn has seen some shit. Dawn wishes to understand what made Horus turn. Dawn would almost certainly have given him a private audience, at which point he'd go like, okay, right. So your vision is we are all fuckered. Now that isn't going to say, I do not believe that is going to send Dawn into any kind of like, oh my god, I'll just give up. No, it's fucking Rogal Dawn, of course not. He's going to still fight it. But now he has information he can use. Alright. So Horus will push us to the very brink. The Emperor will have to board his flagship, all kind of stuff like that. Those are tactical scenarios with which he can work. Not to mention, if he has any sense, he will simply set out a mass announcement. Okay, this is Kai Zulain. He decrypted this bullshit message. Just take a picture of him, and no, don't interview him or anything like that, of course. And spread like he saw the victory of the Imperium. He saw the Emperor slay Horus Lupercal and end the Civil War. Truths. Yes, I know. There are a few other details, but truths. And if a Thurver's statement that a army that knows it will be victorious fights on regardless of casualties, etc., fights more effectively, absolutely. Of course it does. There's no questioning that. It's just... It feels as if the entire idea of the book has been Kaiser Lane sees the future. And the future's shit. Alright. Okay, what do we do with this plot point? Well, nothing. We kill Kaiser Lane and no one's the wiser. Alright, so... were the last 200 plus pages just toilet paper then? Yeah, basically. Okay. It feels so utterly bloody pointless. Now, it was a nice look into the Astropath and the Navigators, sure. The Thunder Warriors have a potentially interesting future, maybe, but it depends on if they do anything with them. The Black Sentinels, Rogal Dawn learns bloody nothing from this. We get to see the Custodes being retarded a couple more times, and we get to see that the Emperor knows what's going to happen, which we kind of already suspected to a degree. It's just, what was the actual point of this work? I'm really wondering. It's like The Furious Abyss all over again. It was like, okay, well, I mean, I didn't mind reading this. It was a nice read, a nice little actionly read, but at the end of the day, what significance does this have to anything else? Like, it's not really part of the war effort. It doesn't really advance any of the characters that we know and that we know we're going to see in the future. It doesn't really set up a story. It doesn't really, unravel any mysteries or give you any real food for thought. It's just the future's shit. People are going to be sad about it, so we're going to keep it a secret and nobody will know, and so absolutely nothing has been achieved. maybe it's just me. Maybe I should just appreciate it for the decent read that it absolutely was. And, you know, the occasional nice tidbits, but I like the Horus Heresy is such a vast goddamn series at this point. Anyways, it is bloody massive. And I am wondering if perhaps we could not have controlled it a little bit better to not necessarily perhaps require quite this many books. Yeah, maybe a little bit of editing here and there might have been a good idea, is all I'm saying. Anywho. That is pretty much all. Like, the last stuff is just the big fight and then nothing, basically. Which I've said like 17 times now, but I'm still just kind of trying to wrap my head around it and trying to see if there's some kind of kernel of additional information that I can pull on and be like, but this thing, and not really. So let me just do the little like my impressions of the book thing at the end, which I've started doing now. They've almost turned into semi-book reviews, but they're far too goddamn long to be book reviews, aren't they? The action scenes in this work were actually genuinely great. I enjoyed a lot of them. They were nice, they were fast-paced, they were flowing, and they felt natural. Which is awesome. Graham McNeil does combat pretty damn well. He does a few things which are like, can they even do that? Like, Atherva is fighting a Calexus assassin, who is absolutely violating him because the Calexus are the complete anti-psyker weapon. And then Atherva cuts himself off from the warp permanently. Like, willingly. And he does this as a conscious thing. Can he? How? What is that? Is that a thing? Is that a thing psychers can do now? I mean, he's 1,000 suns, so if anyone can do it, that's probably him. But it seems like a really odd way of getting him to win the battle against this assassin. Yeah, it just came out a little bit of nowhere. The Custodians being retards is annoying as always, but I'm starting to get used to it. Honestly. Rogal Dawn shows up at the end as a cameo and, well, doesn't behave like a complete moron, so nice, I suppose. Kaiser Lane and Roxanne's connection with the Argo. So that is an interesting part. I really did enjoy that. The idea of the Argo being this clever defense mechanism. Granted, the secret it was guarding didn't actually mean anything, but the entire idea of this ginormous ghost ship as a living piece of a psyker's inner mind haunting him, and how he has to defend against this with mental bulwarks and bastions literally created in his mind, that was really interesting. Honestly, I would have liked to see more of the process of trying to repair Kaizu Lane and, you know, how this is done. More information about the psychers in general, that would have been nice. Maybe a little bit more of a deep dive into the minds of these traitors as well. Like, how do they view the situation more precisely? Because they touch on it, but they don't really delve into it in some kind of detail I would have perhaps liked. Because the World Eaters are just like, well, you know, if like Primax is a traitor, I'll kill him, otherwise I'll join him. Yeah, that's okay. Right? None too subtle, but you're a World Eater, so I get it. What about the Lunar Wolf? What about the Emperor's Children? Like, what are they? How would they think about this? Surely they must go through some rather interesting mental gymnastics, right? Like, okay, but what if I actually do entertain this thought? Then what? Like, do I entertain it at all? And if so, why? And if not so, why? You know? There could be a lot of really interesting things there, but it wasn't really explained or explored. Again, so all in all, to wrap it up, decent read, but also kind of a waste of time. If I am going to be brutally honest. Kind of. Anywho. I will wrap it up there. So, until next time, thank you all very much for watching, and I hope this was slightly less of a waste of time, I pray. And I hope to see you all again soon. Until then, have a good day.